For pre-patent valuation market analysis, usefulness of the cost approach it would be limited when what is appraising an old structure with many functional deficiencies. The cost approach is most appropriate for new buildings, not old, because it's difficult to accurately estimate the cost of constructing an older building with today's techniques and materials. This limits the usefulness of the cost approach when appraising older structures. Note, this question asks when the cost approach is limited, which means it's not as effective, and the cost approach is not as effective when appraising old structures. What is a fee appraiser? What is an independent appraiser who works on a fee basis? A fee appraiser is a non-salaried professional who furnishes appraisal services for a fee. When an appraiser is appraising a property, he usually considers all of the following except, a definition of value: the property rights to be valued, the assessed value, the property identification. What is the assessed value? Assessed value cannot be used in finding the appraised value. Assessed value is used by tax assessors for tax purposes, not by appraisers. An appraiser is usually paid. What is a fee? Based on the amount of time and effort. There are two fundamental reasons for the time and effort rather than valuation method. First is the fact that the differences between any two properties make it impossible to relate the complexity of the task to the value of the property. A high-end property could be a relative no-brainer, while a particular mid-market home could have dozens of variables to be analyzed. The second reason is that basing fees on value places an obvious incentive on appraisers to estimate high, thus distorting reality. Definitions of market value is least concerned with open market objective value, value in exchange market cost. What is market cost? Market value is the present worth of one commodity to draw on the open market. How much an item costs has no relevance to its value. The cost a person originally pays for an item is not relevant to what it would sell for on the current market. When evaluating the data in a neighborhood market survey, a residential property manager will be most concerned with what is trends in population composition. Property management is the operation, control, and oversight of real estate. Management indicates a need to be cared for, monitored, and accountability given for its useful life and condition. This is much akin to the role of management in any business. The neighborhood market survey is more about population than the other options. Which of the following is not a method of calculating depreciation? Sum of the year's digits, straight line, sinking fund. Obsolescence. What is obsolescence? Obsolescence causes depreciation but is not a method for calculating it. Unit cost in place, square foot, quantity survey, and cubic foot most likely refer to. What is appraising? All are methods of determining the cost of replacing improvements at current costs. They all relate to the reproduction approach or cost approach to appraising. Land value is estimated on the basis of what is selling price of comparables. Land value is generally determined using the market data approach, which bases the value on the selling price of comparables. In the event that you can't find comparables for your property, work backward from the value of what you can build on the land, highest and best use, and what the property would be worth with the highest and best improvement. You can then subtract the cost of building the improvement to determine the land value. All of the following are physical characteristics of land except, uniqueness, indestructibility, scarcity, immobility. What is scarcity? Scarcity is a fundamental economic concept that holds that the rarer and more desirable something is, the more valuable it will be. For example, professional athletes are highly paid because only the smallest percentage of people have the ability to perform at that level. Land is scarce because there is a finite amount available. Note, this question asks about physical characteristics of land, and scarcity is not a physical characteristic, it is a concept. A feature found in a comparable property that is not present in the subject property will result in what is a reduction adjustment to the comparable's selling price. It's important to remember that adjustments are made to the comparable, not the subject property. For example, let's assume two homes are identical in every respect, except the comparable property has a swimming pool the subject home lacks. If the subject property is on the market for $175,000 and the swimming pool typically adds $8,000 to the selling price of homes in that area, the appraiser would deduct $8,000 from the sale price of the comparable rather than adding it to the subject property to make his comparison. A spreading at the foundation base would be most appropriately called. What is footing? A footing is the spreading at the foundation base. If the gross rent multiplier is a number less than 20, it means, what is annual rent was used to calculate GRM. Gross rent multiplier, GRM, is a method of estimating the value of an income producing a rental. GRM equals property value, or sale price, divided by gross monthly or annual rent of comparable properties. A multiplier under 20 would most likely represent annual rent, where a multiplier above 20 would most likely represent monthly rent. For example, a $100,000 property with $1,000 monthly rent would have a GRM of $100,000, a tilde middle dot $1,000 equals 100, calculated monthly, but a GRM of 8.3, $100,000. A tilde middle dot $12,000 equals 8.33, when calculated using annual rent. Land value is estimated on the basis of, what is selling price of comparables. Land value is generally determined using the market data approach, which bases the value on the selling price of comparables. In the event that you can't find comparables for your property, work backward from the value of what you can build on the land, highest and best use, and what the property would be worth with the highest and best improvement. You can then subtract the cost of building the improvement to determine the land value. When an appraiser is appraising a property, he usually considers all of the following except, what is the assessed value? Assessed value cannot be used in finding the appraised value. Assessed value is used by tax assessors for tax purposes, not by appraisers. All of the following are physical characteristics of land except, what is scarcity? Scarcity is a fundamental economic concept that holds that the rarer and more desirable something is, the more valuable it will be. For example, professional athletes are highly paid because only the smallest percentage of people have the ability to perform at that level. Land is scarce because there is a finite amount available. Note, this question asks about physical characteristics of land, and scarcity is not a physical characteristic, it is a concept. Which of the following factors contributes most to the maintenance of value in a well-planned residential community? What is conformity to proper land use objectives? Conformity is an appraisal term stating that general uniformity of the structures in an area will produce the highest value. In valuing a single-family residence by the comparison approach, an appraiser would make adjustments to, what is the comparable properties? The objective of an appraisal is to arrive at a fair estimate of the subject property's value based on what comparable properties have actually sold for. The most reliable way of achieving this is to make additions and subtractions from the comparables rather than the other way around. In the example of a 3-bedroom ranch, property A might have sold for $225,000, but features a 2-car garage instead of the subject property's 3-car garage. If the value of the extra garage space is $5,500, the first comparable is raised to $230,500. If the next property is identical to the subject, except it had a brand new, high-end kitchen that added approximately $25,000 to the selling price and the home sold for $257,000, that comparable's price would be reduced to $232,000. Property should be valued at its highest and best use. If an appraiser is appraising a parcel which has a building on the land that is no longer an asset, the appraiser should, what is deduct the demolition cost from the appraisal. If an appraiser is evaluating a property that has a building of no value that will need to be torn down, the appraiser should deduct the cost of demolition from the appraised value of the property. A recorded subdivision plat is used in the, what is lot and block system? Lot and block is the final survey of property being readied for development and identifies each individual parcel in a subdivision. A plat is a map of a subdivision that represents a tract of land, showing the boundaries and location of individual properties, streets, easements and other pertinent information. Which of the following factors would not contribute to obsolescence? What is not wear and tear from use? Physical deterioration is a cause of depreciation, which is a loss in value due to wear and tear and the forces of nature. Obsolescence has nothing to do with wear and tear. There are 2 types of obsolescence: functional obsolescence, which has to do with poor, old design, and economic obsolescence, which has to do with factors outside of the property. There is no such thing as physical obsolescence. When using the market data approach to appraise a single-family home, recent sales are compared to the subject property as to, what is the entire property? The entire property is examined for comparison purposes. In the capitalization method of appraising, the most difficult step is to, what is select a capitalization rate? The hardest part of the capitalization approach is determining the capitalization rate. In the market data approach to appraisal, any differences between the comparables and the subject property are handled in which of the following ways? What is the comparables are adjusted to the characteristics of the subject property. Think the letter C before S. Comparables adjust to subject. C before S. The most difficult aspect of the market data approach is making adjustments for differences between the 2 properties that are being compared to each other. Adjustments are necessary because while some properties are similar, 2 properties are rarely similar concerning everything. What is the highest construction member of a frame? What is ridgeboard? Ridgeboard, in a frame house, the highest structural point. An appraiser is using the market data approach comparing the prices of comparable properties to the subject property. If the comparable properties have a feature that is not present in the subject property, the value of that feature will be, what is subtracted from the sales price of the comparables. When comparing 2 properties, you need to deduct for features of the comparable. For example, if one property has pool and the other does not, you must subtract the value of the pool. Note, you do not adjust the subject property when using the market data approach because that is the actual value you are trying to determine. The objective value of a property is closest to, what is market value? Objective value is what a reasonable person ends up paying for a property which appraisal license requires the least schooling, but still allows an appraiser to appraise residential property of 1 unit to 4 units without regard to transaction value or complexity. What is certified residential appraiser? A certified residential appraiser is qualified to appraise 1 to 4 residential units without regard to value or complexity, and requires 200 hours of schooling. A trainee requires 150 hours of education but must be supervised in any appraisals, and a certified general appraiser can appraise any residential or commercial building, but requires 300 hours of education. Which of the following appraisal reports is a filled-in form using checks and explanations? What is short form? The short form appraisal report is a filled-in form using checks and explanations, while a letter form appraisal is a brief written report and a narrative report is an extensive written report, often accompanied by a variety of supporting documentation. Which of the methods could be used by appraisers for estimating the cost of construction? All of the other options are correct. Unit in place method, square footage method, quantity survey method. What is all of the other options are correct. Methods by appraisers for estimating the cost of construction. Unit in place method calculates the added cost of single units installed. Square footage method utilizes exterior dimensions to calculate the cost per square foot. Quantity survey method calculates the cost of labor and materials to construct each component of a building. Very accurate but time consuming. Land value is estimated on the basis of. What is selling price of comparables? Land value is generally determined using the market data approach, which bases the value on the selling price of comparables. In the event that you can't find comparables for your property, work backward from the value of what you can build on the land, highest and best use, and what the property would be worth with the highest and best improvement. You can then subtract the cost of building the improvement to determine the land value.